An older song from her, and hey, what a phenomenal career she's had since then. Certainly looking forward to seeing her in concert a little bit later this year. 2 concerts, one in Auckland, one in Christchurch. Check out the details of that, and hey, hope to see you there. Something which is, particularly tough at the moment for people who are self-employed tradies, chippies, plumbers, electricians, the like, who perhaps during the boom years got lots of government contracts to build social housing in many different parts of New Zealand, and of course the government's pulled the plug on all of those. And hey, that's tough for people that want houses. It's also tough for the people that were building them, and the impact that that has not just on their financial state of being, but on their psychological state of being. John Peachy from the Thinkfarm joins me on the program. JP, kia ora, good morning.
Kia ora, Andrew. Yep. Good to see you. One of those topics, unfortunately, which is biting the average New Zealander at the moment. Some of the stats which just come out, and unpleasant conversation, but necessary conversation.
It is a tough one. It is also one of these ones where I need to do a little bit of a disclaimer, because what we are about to talk about is tough, and it may be very alarming for some people who are right on the edge on this one, or perhaps directly affected, because this is something which has happened to a friend or family member. This is a trigger warning, I suppose, because we are going to be talking suicides. Too many young men or tradies taking their lives because of how desperate the situation is.
Yeah, Andrew, I became interested a few years ago when I heard that 5 young farmers had killed themselves before Christmas.
Wow.
Just a couple of years ago, and that the farming industry had the highest suicide rate per industry. Now that's been overtaken by the construction industry, and there's some real question marks over what the heck is going on. But 80 construction workers took their own lives in the last year. So 80, but that kind of even hides the real figures, because 1,628 had to be hospitalised from self-harm, from failed attempts at suicide. So you add those figures up, and those are really scary statistics. And this is predominantly young men, 20 to 24, but not exclusively. You look right across the spectrum of ages. We have this unfortunate habit of breaking these statistics down into these little subsets. But when you look at all men between 20 and 60, the statistics are really, really poor. And so, I think I'm looking at it from a faith perspective. I'm looking at it from a community harm perspective, and trying to work out, what can we do? What input can we have? I work with leaders and trying to help them understand that well-being is about knowing people and being there for them, rather than all the accoutrements of the well-being industry. It's really well-being is a someone, not a something. So I keep saying to people, it's having someone who knows you, understands you, who says, mate, how are you going? So I'm really concerned. There's no upside to this conversation,
no,
Andrew.
There isn't. And hey, let's look at some of what maybe some of the causal factors before we jump into solutions on this one. Perhaps it's in the name, and perhaps this is the connection between the farming community and the construction sector. A sole trader, you're running a small business, you're doing it yourself. If you don't get out of bed and hit the tools, then nobody else is going to do it. These are people that don't have an HR department, that don't have the infrastructure of a corporation around them. There are no checks and balances. It's just them. And
that's right.
Is that part of the problem, do you think?
Isolation is a terrible thing. And I may have said it once before, that the opposite of connection is not isolation. The opposite of connection is desolation. Yeah. And people who are alone and having to cope with the financial pressure, the stresses. One of the most sadistic things, if I can use a terrible word, is during the COVID crisis, the banks started to call in loans on farmers. Right, in the midst of a crisis, the banks who are making record profits started to call in loans of people they thought might be a bit shaky. I mean, we have to look at ourselves as a society, but isolation is definitely a huge contributing factor. That a lot of our industry in this country is 2 or 3 or 4 employees. an employer business owner, which is carrying all the regulatory cost,
Yeah.
all the employment law stuff now, which is coming down on people, and they have to shoulder that alone. And if the bank senses, smells that you might have a small issue, they close things down.
Yeah.
I think in the last quarter in this country, 700 businesses went into liquidation. So we've got some pain out there, and ordinary people that we know are suffering from the stresses of this. So we understand that. You add that to some other really unhelpful statistics. We have a 60% higher than Australia death rate in our workplaces.
Wow.
And I've said this before, we have one of the highest bullying rates in the workplace in the entire OECD. We have really got to stop and look at ourselves in some areas here, because these are people's lives. These are families. You imagine nearly 2,000 blokes passing away, how broad that impact is. Well, sorry, not passing away, but affected by suicide one way or another. Yeah. That's a very, very broad community that's being affected, numbers wise. So, the good thing is, and I think the ability of us, I love, very, very simple scripture, 1 John 4:19. We love because he first loved us. We have to put love in action here, right? We've got to get in front of people and ask them the question, how are you going? What can I do? How can I help? The gospel is going to cost us in this regard, but we need to be going out there and asking our friends, our neighbours. They run those series of, you may have seen them on TV, series of ads about heart attacks. How do you spot someone's having a heart attack? Yep. And the classic one, someone grabs their chest and collapses to the ground, and they're saying, actually, no, that's not the classic symptom. It's actually people going still. Yeah. It's like people just completely going, kind of numb. As their heart is collapsing around them, sort of thing. And I think that's an appropriate way to look at our friends and family. When people go silent, when someone someone said, what's up with Andrew? Because he's just not himself. Yeah. I think that's a God red flag to say, you need to ask the question, right? What's going on? Personalities don't just change, right? Something changes them, and I think we need to ask the question. John Wesley, the great Methodist preacher, talked about this, and it's the motto of the Wesleyan College in South Auckland. Do all you can in all the ways you can, to all the souls you can, in every place you can, at all the times you can, with all the energy, all the passion you can, as long as you can. That's really the call to the gospel, is to start getting in people's faces and asking questions. How can I love you? What can I do? How can I support you? I think
if we know somebody who's in the building industry, if we know somebody who is perhaps having difficulty with running a small business, getting beyond the first round of, so how you going, and then giving that, oh no, I'm doing fine, thanks, not accepting that as the actual truth of what's happening. We sometimes need to do a little bit more digging. We sometimes need to push into that, hey, maybe this is none of my business, but I'm making it my business because I care about you.
Well, what's the worst that can happen? Someone gets offended because you're prying in their business. I mean, okay, chances are if they do that, they're probably never going to let you in the first place. But, there are things that we can do, simple things we can do. Maybe you see a young couple who've gone out in business, he's bricklaying or he's plumbing, or, maybe his partner, his wife is doing the books. They're under pressure. Say, hey, can we babysit one night so you can go out for a night? Or can we have the kids so you can have a night away? I mean, I think we have to... Our faith has to have substance to it, right? And sometimes that's cost. Can we throw $100 on the table? Can I take you out for breakfast? Whatever it is. I think we've actually got to do something practical here. Yes, we've got to ask the question, but really we've got to back it up with some practical stuff. And there's people like Christians Against Poverty. There's some fantastic organizations that can be introduced to people who are struggling financially. The male pride and ego thing can be a really dangerous thing, Andrew, I think, in this regard, is that we're expected to be the provider, expected to be the strong ones in these situations.
Honestly, this is really tough. If there's been a boom period where you've been the guy that's been able to get all these things for your family, then that can boost your ego. Flipping that around and not being able to provide, and just hanging around home a little bit more because there's not the work on. Or this is one of the worst scenarios that I can think of being in a situation where you were so busy that you took on some extra staff and you had a young apprentice and you were loving the fact that you were inputting into other guys' lives, and then one by one you've had to tell them the bad news that you can no longer afford to employ them. That rips the guts out of you.
Well, in 2008, with the global financial meltdown, I had a large audio-visual company and I had a bunch of employees. And we lost 90% of our business within about 3 months. It was like someone just went through and switched all the lights off. It was incredible.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, you're going from an okay situation to, I had to let staff go. I had one staff member who sued me because I let them go. It was like, you can't get blood from a stone, guys. And we lost the house, the business, the whole 9 yards. So I know what we're talking about here.
Yeah.
And I know what the depression is like when it sets in. But that sense of embarrassment, I can't provide. I can't put a roof over my head. That is a tough call, and I said to you off air, men don't fear being wrong. Right. What they fear is irrelevance.
Yeah.
When they're no longer the breadwinner, when they're no longer the one who can put the food on the table because of circumstances, that is a wounded animal, and that's a dangerous animal. We've got to really look after people, and if not the church, then what are we doing here?
Yeah.
Right. I mean, this is really where the rubber meets the road, I think.
No, such important stuff indeed. Hey, JP, thank you for the work that you do in this space of speaking truth and giving people the opportunity to talk about their own struggles and being so open and honest about your own journey as well. If people wanted to connect through, I know you do regular podcasts as well, the People Mechanics podcast. I've got some interesting episodes coming up shortly. People can subscribe to that, of course. More details available at thethinkfarm.org. JP, thanks so much for what you do. Thanks for your time today.
Thanks, man. Take good care.
Hey, thanks very much for joining us in the Rhema studio. Thanks very much for watching the interview. It's kind of nice to have an audience, actually. And if you did like what you watched, then do give us a like, do give us the thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more interviews like that one, or perhaps even better, subscribe and those interviews will come straight to you. Don't forget to turn on your notifications, and we'll see you in the next one. Cheers.